David Harrington managed a $4 billion infrastructure portfolio for one of Europe's largest sovereign wealth funds. In March 2024, he flew to Riyadh for a final due diligence meeting on NEOM. He landed expecting to sign. He left 12 hours later and recommended his fund reject the investment entirely. His assessment in 2 words: uninvestable. Structurally and financially uninvestable. But here is what Saudi Arabia doesn't want the world to know. Harrington wasn't the first. He wasn't even the 10th. Dozens of institutional investors have quietly walked away from NEOM since 2022. In this video, I will expose why the world's largest investment funds are refusing to touch NEOM. I will reveal the due diligence findings they shared behind closed doors. And I will show you the financial data that proves Saudi Arabia is now funding the most expensive failure in modern history entirely alone. The money trail tells a story they can't hide anymore. Less than 72 hours ago, industry sources confirmed that 3 additional sovereign wealth funds formally declined participation in NEOM's latest funding round. This brings the total number of major institutional investors who have publicly or privately rejected NEOM to over 20 since 2021. The project was supposed to attract $300 billion in foreign capital. It has attracted almost none, according to the Financial Times. Foreign direct investment into NEOM-specific projects totaled less than $1 billion by the end of 2024. Less than $1 billion against a $300 billion target. That is a 99.7% shortfall. The entire financial model depended on attracting foreign capital. Without it, the Public Investment Fund is funding NEOM essentially alone. And PIF's resources are not unlimited. The original NEOM business case presented to international investors in 2018 was built on 3 pillars. Foreign capital would fund 60% of construction. Revenue from tourism, technology, and industry would begin flowing by 2025. Oil prices would remain above $80 per barrel through the development period. All 3 pillars have collapsed. Foreign capital hasn't materialized. Revenue is years away at best, and oil is trading around $65. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman promised NEOM would be self-funding within a decade. It has been 8 years. Not a single dollar of revenue has been generated from the line. Saudi Arabia sold the world a vision of private capital building the future. Instead, the Saudi state is spending its own oil wealth on a project that every major investor has examined and rejected. The due diligence reports tell the story, starting with the engineering risk. When sovereign wealth funds evaluate infrastructure investments, they commission independent engineering assessments. The assessments on NEOM have been devastating. Abu Dhabi's Mubadala Investment Company was among the first to conduct detailed technical due diligence on the line in 2020. Their engineering team spent 4 months reviewing structural feasibility. According to industry sources, Mubadala's assessment identified fundamental structural viability concerns with a 500-meter height specification. They declined participation. Qatar Investment Authority conducted its own review in 2021. Their team focused on infrastructure logistics and water supply feasibility. Chia's conclusion was similar. The infrastructure requirements exceeded any realistic delivery timeline. They declined. One investment director at a European pension fund who reviewed NEOM's financial projections described what he found. The return on investment calculations are equally damning. At current spending rates, Nebraska NEOM has consumed approximately $50 billion to produce 2.4 kilometers of a planned 170-kilometer structure. That translates to roughly $20 billion per kilometer. By comparison, the world's most expensive railway project, Crossrail in London, cost approximately $200 million per kilometer. NEOM is costing 100 times more per kilometer than the most expensive comparable infrastructure on Earth. No rational investor would accept that cost profile. The operational revenue model has additional problems. NEOM's projections assumed 9 million residents generating tourism, technology, and commercial revenue. That target was quietly revised to 300,000 by 2030. Even that figure assumes construction that hasn't begun on the residential sections. One managing director at a Singapore-based infrastructure fund explained why his firm walked away. The governance concerns completed the picture. Multiple funds flagged that NEOM's decision-making structure concentrates authority in ways that create unacceptable investment risk. Project specifications have changed repeatedly without investor consultation. Budget overruns are absorbed without external audit accountability. The 20% staff layoff in 2024 was announced without prior notice to investment partners. For institutional investors managing pension funds and sovereign wealth, these governance gaps are disqualifying. They cannot explain to their stakeholders why they invested in a project with no independent oversight. 2017, NEOM announced. International road shows begin immediately. Presentations to sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and private equity firms across 4 continents. 2019, first round of due diligence reports returned. Multiple funds flag structural and geological concerns. Saudi officials dismissed the findings as overly conservative. 2021, second wave of institutional rejections. Mubadala, Chia, and several European pension funds formally decline. The foreign capital target begins looking impossible. 2022, NEOM restructures its investment pitch. The megastructure is de-emphasized. Technology and tourism become the selling points. Investors remain skeptical. 2023, Bloomberg confirms the line scaled back to 2.4 kilometers. Finance Minister Al-Jadyan publicly acknowledges delays. Remaining interested investors withdraw. 2024, 20% staff layoffs. Multiple international media outlets report that NEOM's foreign investment deficit now exceeds $200 billion. 2025. The Financial Times quotes a former employee saying, "Everyone knows the project won't work." Institutional investors point to the quote as validation of their rejection decision. Several factors explain why foreign capital has completely abandoned NEOM. First, the engineering risk is uninsurable. No major insurer will underwrite construction liability for a 500-meter structure spanning 170 kilometers on sedimentary bedrock. Second, the cost escalation has no ceiling. Original estimates of $500 billion have been internally revised past $1.5 trillion. Investors cannot model a project with an undefined budget. Third, there is no comparable project in history to benchmark against. Investment models require precedent. The line has none. It exists in a risk category that fund managers literally cannot evaluate. Fourth, the governance structure provides no investor protections. Institutional capital requires independent board representation, transparent auditing, and dispute resolution mechanisms. NEOM offers none. Finally, Saudi Arabia's credit risk is rising. Budget deficits, declining oil revenue, and expanding mega-project commitments are creating sovereign debt pressure that makes all Saudi investments riskier. The investment community isn't staying quiet about NEOM anymore. The silence that characterized the early years is breaking across every professional platform. LinkedIn has become a forum for investment professionals to share their NEOM rejection experiences. Fund managers, risk analysts, and due diligence consultants are posting detailed accounts of why they recommended against investment. Financial media coverage has shifted dramatically. Bloomberg, the Financial Times, and the Wall Street Journal have all published investigative pieces questioning NEOM's viability in the past 12 months. Reddit communities focused on sovereign wealth and infrastructure investment have threads with thousands of comments analyzing NEOM's financial impossibility. Private equity forums that once hosted recruitment discussions for NEOM positions now feature warnings from former employees about the project's direction. Saudi Arabia has responded to the criticism with pressure. Investment banks that publicly question NEOM risk losing access to lucrative Saudi government bond offerings. Several analysts have described being warned informally. Conference organizers have reported receiving requests to exclude NEOM critics from panel discussions at Middle East investment summits. The control extends across the financial ecosystem, but the harder they press, the more the financial community talks. You cannot silence a market that has already priced in failure. The consequences of this investment exodus are already visible. Without foreign capital, the Public Investment Fund bears the entire financial burden. PIF has committed approximately 40% of its domestic portfolio to NEOM and Vision 2030 projects. That concentration creates systemic risk. If NEOM fails, PIF's domestic investment strategy fails with it. Saudi Arabia posted a $21 billion budget deficit in 2024. Oil revenue covers roughly 62% of government spending. Every dollar diverted to NEOM is a dollar not spent on healthcare, education, or infrastructure Saudi citizens actually need. The employment impact compounds the damage. NEOM promised 300,000 jobs at full operation. The 20% layoff in 2024 eliminated thousands of positions. Every job lost at NEOM reverberates through the Saudi economy. Housing contracts canceled, consumer spending reduced, local suppliers losing their largest customer. The regional impact may be the most lasting damage. Abu Dhabi has absorbed the institutional capital that rejected NEOM. Dubai's real estate market is thriving on professionals who were supposed to relocate to NEOM. Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain are all benefiting from NEOM's credibility collapse. The capital isn't leaving the Gulf. It is leaving Saudi Arabia specifically. What does Saudi Arabia's leadership know about the investment shortfall that they aren't sharing? Internal projections must show the gap between promised foreign capital and actual commitments. Acknowledging the investment reality requires an uncomfortable truth. NEOM was designed as a magnet for foreign capital in a post-oil economy. It has achieved the opposite. It has driven foreign capital away from Saudi Arabia entirely. To be fair, Saudi Arabia's non-NEOM investment landscape has bright spots. The entertainment sector is growing. Tourism to Riyadh and Jeddah is increasing. Technology investment outside NEOM is attracting legitimate interest. But these successes are happening despite NEOM, not because of it. Every dollar of credibility NEOM destroys makes other Saudi investments harder to sell internationally. There are potential restructuring paths. Converting NEOM's existing infrastructure to data center and AI campuses could attract technology investment. The remote location and available solar power suit that use case. Scaling back to a conventional economic zone with realistic population targets could make the numbers work. But realistic means thousands of residents, not millions. Partnering with established developers rather than maintaining centralized government control could restore investor confidence, but that requires surrendering the authority that defines the current structure. The window for restructuring is closing. Each quarter of continued spending under the current model deepens the eventual write-down that investors have already priced in. What happens to a project when the entire global investment community has examined it, rejected it, and moved on? That is the question Saudi Arabia's leadership refuses to answer publicly. Saudi Arabia promised the world the most ambitious investment opportunity in history. $300 billion in foreign capital building the future of civilization. Instead, fund after fund conducted due diligence, found the numbers impossible, and walked away. They took their capital to Abu Dhabi, to Dubai, to Singapore. Anywhere but NEOM. You were told foreign investors believed in this vision. That was a lie. They examined it, rejected it, and Saudi Arabia kept spending your oil revenue pretending otherwise. Your analysis matters more than any Saudi investment brochure. Is NEOM a restructuring opportunity or a $50 billion write-off? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe if you want the truth about where the money is really going, because the investors have already voted with their wallets, and the verdict is devastating.